Half an hour. Well, back to the shoe thrower targeting John Howard.
We're watching Q&A with the that's Q&A special with the former Prime Minister John Howard.
Sorry, Tony, take it as a comment.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Please.
And this is for your
just someone please remove that gentleman.
The former PM was doing a live TV interview when the anti-war protester took aim. Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey was a minister in the Howard government. He joins us now. Joe, good morning to you. Look, should the former PM be targeted like this, even though he's out of politics? He's a private individual now?
No, it was a rather cowardly act from some mug in the audience, and he couldn't even throw a shoe straight. So, you know, he's better off using words rather than throwing something at another person to try and make his point.
Yeah, we've had a couple of emails from people saying, yes, John Howard is a private individual, but he's put himself back in the limelight, so he should expect to cop criticism.
Well, violence is the last resort of a coward, and anyone who tries to use violent behaviour against another person in the course of a discussion is, quite frankly, a coward himself. And I'm glad that he was thrown out of the audience, and you move on. Yep,
totally agree. Well, let's move on, and your big issue is some of the banks will announce their annual profits this week, over the next couple of days, expected to be huge. You believe the banks are out of control. You want an inquiry. What should that inquiry focus on?
Well, ultimately it should focus on more competition, Koshy. We've missed out on a massive round of competition in the last few months, and with the effective demise of an independent St George Bank, the demise of Bank West, Aussie, Wizard and Rams Home Loans are no longer independent active participants, and I would say to you that without competition, Australians are facing in particular 4 major banks that are making bigger and bigger profits and are seeking the opportunity to gouge home borrowers. And I think we need to do something. The Treasurer has had 31 warnings. He's warned them 31 times, do not go further than the RBA, and they just ignore him.
Okay. Look, I was at a function on Friday night. I sat at the same table as the bosses of the 4 big banks. You weren't their favourite person in discussions on Friday night. They're saying this country benefits from strong banks, and that's what they're trying to be, strong banks giving good returns to shareholders.
Yeah, and we agree with that. In fact, I was a financial services minister in the Howard government that helped to ensure that that was the case. Through the regulation laws I put in place, we reduced the heavy burden of regulation, but we had better regulation. I'd say to you, Koshy, the Australian banks are in a privileged position. Taxpayers have been supporting them with funded guarantees. Taxpayers have been supporting them with investments in some of their funding markets. Now is the time for the banks to give something back. We need a proper, full-scale review of the financial system so that everyone can understand exactly where financial services is going to take us over the next few years.
And we have helped the banks out during the global financial crisis, and there is a fine line between strong banks and a gravy train, isn't there? And
absolutely.
You just get that feeling. Look, you were finance minister in the Howard government. One of your favourite topics or projects was to make Australia a financial hub for the Asia-Pacific region. Yesterday we had the Singapore Stock Exchange launch a takeover. They're calling it a merger. It's basically a takeover of the Australian Stock Exchange. Should that go ahead? Is that in the national interest?
Well, to be fair to the ASX, they've offered us a briefing. We'll receive that briefing. I want to hear from Wayne Swan why the Australian Stock Exchange being taken over by the Singapore Stock Exchange is in our national interest.
Well, do you think it is? We want to hear from you too.
Well, as you said, I have long championed Australia as a financial centre for the Asian region. Now, as much as Singapore are our very, very good friends, they are also our competitors for financial services jobs in the region. And I would want to know exactly from the ASX, and I want to know, and Tony Abbott wants to know from Wayne Swan and the government, how is this going to help us to be a financial centre.
Okay, from what you're saying, and you're being very diplomatic because you don't want to offend the Singaporeans, you're saying you don't believe it should go ahead, you've got concerns, you've got to be convinced.
Well, it is effectively a monopoly, Koshy. The ASX is, look, effectively, there's a couple of other smaller exchanges, but really, it is a monopoly. It is iconic for Australia. I want to know how we're going to benefit out of it. Now, we've got to be mature about this. We welcome investment. It's a good thing. Even Channel 7 is majority foreign owned, I think, these days. So we can't be critical of foreign ownership. But we've got to consider carefully when a monopoly in the Australian marketplace is being bought out by an overseas interest, whether that is in our interest. Okay. And that's the point I'm making.
All right, I've got to be diplomatic on the Channel 7 ownership, so I know where you're coming from. Thanks for doing that. Joe, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Koshy. Take care.
It is 16 minutes past 7 o'clock. Well, there's been a dramatic